Hi everyone, welcome to the second part of this tutorial where I show you how to implement a responsive navigation. In the previous tutorial, I showed you how to create the markup, and as you can see, our website looks very basic right now. In this tutorial, I will add functionality to the site and I'll show you how to make the navigation appear and disappear with the help of CSS and JavaScript. To begin with, the first thing I want to do is add an arrow right next to About and Services. If you look at the final product, you can see that the arrows appear right here and here. So that's what I will do with the help of CSS. So if you remember, we added a span which had a I tag nested in it right next to About, and that I tag had the class of arrow and also of down. So I'll style the class arrow first. I will give it a border of solid black, and I will also give it a border width of 0, 2 pixels, 2 pixels, and 0. I will give it a display inline block and also a padding of 3 pixels. If we have a look at the page now, we can see that it appears right next to About. It's not pointing the right direction. That's why we have two further classes which are up and down. So I'll add styling to the class down first. I will give it a property of transform and then rotate 45 degrees. If you have a look at it now, you can see it's pointing in the right direction. I'll also do up, and that one will also have a property of transform. I will rotate this minus 135 degrees. I originally took this from V3 School as I saw this on their website and thought it's a great idea, so I will link to them in the description so you can check out their version. And finally, I will also give this a margin bottom of 2 pixels and a margin left of 3 pixels, just so it's a bit further away from the text and more aligned with it. So if you have a look at it now, it looks like this. Okay, next I want to implement the JavaScript. So I only want the JavaScript to execute when the page has fully loaded. For this, I will attach an event listener to the window. This should fire when DOM content is loaded. And the function that should get called is setup, which I will do next. So this line of code basically says execute setup whenever the page has loaded. So I will now define the function setup. And within that function, I want to access the button with the burger. And I will do this by saying const burger is document get element by ID, and then I'll just use the ID of it to access it. If we have a look at the HTML, the button has the ID of burger, so I'm just accessing this element with it. Now that we have accessed the element, I want to add an event listener to it, so I'll just do burger add event listener, and this should execute when I click on the button. And then the function it should execute will be called show hide nav. Now, in order for this to be working, I need to specify that function. I'll just declare that now. Within that function, I want to access the navigation menu that we are going to show and hide. So I'll just use const nav. And then I'll access it again using document get element by ID. And the ID is header nav. Now that we have the nav element saved in this variable, I want to use JavaScript to add and remove a CSS class from the element. This CSS class will be called slide in. So whenever the nav has slide in applied to it, it will show, and whenever it's not applied, it will not be showing up on our website. So to know whether it is currently visible or not, I need to check whether this class is applied. For this, I will use an if statement. So if nav.classlist.contains Okay, so I'm checking, does the navigation have the class slide in applied? If it has, I want to remove it. If it does not, I want to add it. So every time we press on the burger icon, it will run this function and it will check, is it applied? If it is, then I want to remove it so that the navigation disappears. If it's not applied, then the user wants to open it, so I'll add the slide-in navigation, the slide-in class. So let's add this now. Okay, let's implement the styling for the slide-in class. First of all, I will style the header nav. I will give it a width of 250 pixels and also a height of 100 VH. I will give it a background color of black and I will give it a text color of white. If you remember, we gave the border color black to the arrow class. This will not show up if the background is also black, so I will change this over to white as well. Finally, I also want to remove the header nav from the document flow, so I will give it a position of absolute. I want to place it off screen, so I will give it a left property and a value of -300 pixels. I also want to apply a transition to the left property of 0.5 seconds, just so that when it appears, it's gradual, so it kind of appears from the left. Then I will apply the fade in class to the header nav, and the only property I will specify is left, and I will give it 0 pixels so that it appears exactly at the beginning of the page. So if we have a look at the site now, and I click on the burger icon, nothing happens, which means that I made a mistake somewhere. Okay, so I misspelled DOM content loaded, which means that this never got executed. If you have a look at the page again, hopefully it should work. It's still not working. Okay. Oh yes, I gave it the wrong class. Now it should work. Next, I want to implement a feature that this nested list appears and disappears whenever I click on either About or Services. I also want the arrow to change from pointing downwards to upwards and vice versa. So let's do that next. I will start off by defining a CSS class with the name height. I will give it the height of 0. I will also give it the opacity of 0. I will give it overflow hidden so that the child elements, so the list items and the links, do not appear and also are hidden. Then I will also give it a transition and I will apply it to all. The duration will be 500 milliseconds. Ease in. I want to apply this class to the nested lists with the class header nav nested list. So I'll just add height next to this. Now, if we have a look at the website and I expand the navigation, they are hidden. I also want to define a show class, which should have the height of auto, so it will be as height as the content within it, and the opacity should be 1. I will give this a transition of all 0.5 as and ease into, because I want it to transition both directions. Next, I want to implement the JavaScript. For that, I will access both of the list elements with the class header nav button, and I'll save it in a variable called const nav btns, which stands for nav buttons. I will use document query selector all, and I'll pass in the class header nav button. This nav buttons variable holds 2 elements and not just 1. Because of that, I cannot apply the add event listener to both of them. Instead, I will have to use a for each loop and apply it individually. I'll do this by using nav btns for each, and then I'll just say nav btn. This stands for one of the elements, and whatever function I define here will be executed for each element. I will just add an event listener to each of them, which should fire when there is a click event. And I will define a function which will receive the click event as an argument, and then should call the function slide close nav with the event as an argument. Now I only have to define the function slide close nav, so let's do that. So whenever I click on either About or Services, I only want the nested list below them to show up, not both of them. For that, I will use event.target to determine which button was clicked on. So for example, if I do console log e.target here, I can console log the element that I am clicking on. To illustrate this, I will open up the console, and if I click on About, it has console log the ally with the class header nav button, and if I open it up, it has the text About, and it has two children, the span, which has a child element I, and also the UL. I want to access this grandchild with the class arrow down, and I also want to access the second child, which is the UL with the class header nav list. To do that, I will use e.target.children. I am going to access the I element first, and I will do this by using e.target.children0, which is this one is the span element, and I want to access its child, so I can just use children0 again. I also want to access the nested list, so I'll just save that in a variable called list, and I can use e.target.children, but in this case it should be the second, so I'll specify here 1 because we start counting at 0 in JavaScript. So now I should have both of them saved. So what I want to do is check whether list has the hide class applied or not. If it has the hide class applied, it is not showing up, so I want to remove that and instead add the show class. Also, I want to change the direction of the arrow, so I will remove the down class and add the up class. I will use an if statement to check. So if list offset height is 0, so the offset height gives you the height of an element, including borders and padding in pixels. Here I'm asking, is the nested list of a height 0? If yes, that means it's not showing, so I want to remove the hide list. Sorry, the hide class. Instead, I want to add the show class. Additionally, I want to change the icon. So I will remove the class down, which makes it point downwards, and instead I will add the up class, which makes it point upwards. So let's check if this works. It's working, the arrow has changed, and also we see the nested list. If I do services, the same thing happens. I will now give it an else statement, and I will basically say it should do the exact opposite. Instead of hide, it should remove show and add hide. It should remove up and add down. So now if we have a look at it again, if I click on it, it expands, and if I click on it again, it disappears, and it only does for the nested list, which is below the list item I clicked on. However, there is one thing I would like to show you. If I click on the arrow, it is not working. The reason for this is that the span element is registered as the target of the event, and the span does not have a second child. It does not have the UL right below it. To solve that, I can add a CSS property to this specific item. The CSS property which will achieve this is called pointer events, and you have to give it the value of none. So I'll just do header nav span pointer events none. Now, even if I click on the arrow, I'll just refresh this, it should work. Yes, this way the span is not registered as the target of the event. It will always be the list item here. The last thing I want to show you in this video is the links sliding in from the left. So let's do that now. I will paste in the CSS to save some time, and I'll just quickly explain it. So I added this header nav UL, and I said its position should be relative. It should be positioned off screen by 300 pixels to the left, and I just gave it some padding. Then I selected the list, which is directly under the UL, which is directly nested below the header nav. So that will only select these 5, but not the ones which are below about. I just gave it a border of blue. And then for each of these ULs, I applied an animation. And this animation should only run if the header nav has the class slide in applied to it. For the animation, I just said that from left, minus 300 pixels, it should animate to left 0 pixels, and I also changed the opacity. So now I'll also have to add a bit of JavaScript for this to work. First, I will select the 5 allies, which are on the first level. I will save them in a variable called allies. And I will use document query selector all. I will pass in header nav, and I'll select the UL directly below it, so the first UL, and then only the allies directly below the UL. Then I will get the amount of allies by using lis.length, and I will save it in a variable called num. So num will now hold 5. I will declare another variable called delay, and I will give it the value 0.3. These two will change, so instead of const, I'm using let. My goal here is to apply a transition delay to each of the allies, and I want to keep on increasing the delay. I will use a while loop for it, and I will paste it into this code again to save some typing, and I'll just explain how it works. So here's the while loop. So I'm basically saying while the num is bigger than 0, execute this. When we begin, num will be 5, and then here I am saying decrease it by 1, so it will, with each loop, it will go 1 smaller. Then I want to select each list item, and I want to begin with the first one. So I'll just say lis.length minus num. So the first time this runs, lis.length will be 5, and number will be 5 as well. So 5 minus 5 is 0. So it will select the very first element, and it will apply an animation delay of 0.3 seconds. Then it will, as mentioned, decrease the number and increase the delay by 0.3. The next time this loop runs, num will be 4, so 5 minus 4 will evaluate to 1, so it will apply the animation delay to the next element, and this will go on as long as there is an element. So I have saved the JavaScript file and also the style sheet. If we have a look at the site now and click on it, each of them comes in with a delay. This is all for this video. I hope you found it useful and that you learned something. If you did, please subscribe. I put out tutorials every week. In the next video, I will show you how to style the page so that it looks nice. Have a great day, and thanks so much for watching.